My name is Krista Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I vanished, not to run away, but to finally be free. It started on a Saturday afternoon, in the heart of Seattle's glittering suburbia, manicured lawns, luxury SUVs, and picture-perfect homes hiding rot just beneath the surface. My mother's mansion was packed. 30 people. Friends, extended family, acquaintances I barely recognized, laughing and clinking glasses in her over-decorated living room like they belonged there. The occasion? My niece Lily's 13th birthday party. I was the one who paid for most of it. The cake, the catering, the decorations. Even the new iPhone she was about to unwrap, $850, freshly purchased on a credit card with my name on it. Emma, my sister, and Lily's mother, had texted me last week saying, "That's the bare minimum." You know how kids are. I stood in the corner, invisible as always. Not part of the laughter, not a participant in the hollow conversations about ski trips and Teslas. Just a human wallet with a smile painted on her face. When Lily opened my gift, she barely looked up. No thank you, no smile. Just a half-hearted glance before she tossed the box aside and leaned into Emma, whispering something with a smirk. Then she said it, loud enough to slice through every voice in the room. "Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, nobody would even notice." Laughter exploded. Real, ugly laughter. The kind that didn't just sting, it carved. I stood there frozen. 30 faces. Not one looked shocked. Not one person said, "Hey, that's not okay." Not even a nervous chuckle to soften it. Just laughter. Genuine and cruel. Emma didn't flinch. She scrolled through her phone like it was all beneath her, a smug grin playing on her lips. My mother, Linda, stirred a pot in the kitchen, pretending not to hear, but I saw her shoulders lift ever so slightly, a gesture of approval she probably thought went unnoticed. My father, Patrick, didn't bother pretending. "That kid's not wrong," he said, raising his beer in a toast. The room erupted again, as if he'd just made the punchline of the evening. Even the cousins I only saw at Christmas leaned in with grins, like spectators enjoying a public execution. Lily, with her pink glitter top and air of boredom, squinted at me. "Thanks for the phone, Aunt Krista," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She didn't even hold it like it mattered. I smiled. That's what I was taught to do. Smile. Be agreeable. Let them step on you, as long as it didn't ruin the family image. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with the quiet precision of a bone finally cracking under pressure that had built up for decades. I walked into the kitchen, my hands clenched so tight that my nails dug crescent moons into my palms. The smell of frosted cake and stew turned my stomach. Behind me, the family sang happy birthday, voices slurring from too much wine. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew I didn't matter to them. I never had. They didn't see me. They saw a resource. A safety net. A walking ATM. But what none of them realized was just how much power I held. Not emotionally, not in their hearts. But in cold, hard numbers. Numbers that paid for Emma's car, for Lily's school, for my mother's groceries, for the electricity keeping that entire godforsaken mansion lit. I opened my banking app. 2 taps. Emma's cards? Frozen. Another tap. The internet bill? Cancelled. The family group data plan? Gone. The savings account I'd set up for Lily's college fund, the one Emma took money from every other month for emergencies? Emptied. Reclaimed. I shut off the utilities I paid for. The accounts I managed. The subscriptions they used under my name. It was like turning off life support. I set my glass down quietly and walked out the back door. Not a single person noticed. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't call anyone. I drove straight to the lake house, a small, dusty cabin on the outskirts of Tacoma that only I remembered. I had bought it during a rare bout of hope, thinking one day it would be a place for peace. They had turned it into a party pad over the years, trashing it whenever they felt like celebrating. But not this time. I turned on every light in the house. I walked into the back bedroom and pulled out the old black backpack I'd used in college. Still intact. Still waiting. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't grab any keepsakes. I filled it with documents. Bills. Bank statements. Printouts of emails where Emma had demanded money. Screenshots of texts from my mother asking me to cover just this month's rent. Receipts from casinos with Patrick's name on them, all tied to the credit cards I'd co-signed. I organized it neatly. Chronologically. Then I drove back before sunrise. The house was still full. Music still thumped weakly through the windows. They hadn't even noticed I was gone. I slipped in through the side door and placed the backpack beneath the staircase, where I knew someone would trip over it in the morning. That was my goodbye. Not a word. Just facts and proof. I didn't leave them with a scream. I left them with a mirror. Then I walked out again. For good. I drove for hours, stopping only at a motel near the edge of the state line. When I stepped into the room, it smelled of bleach and old carpets. But it was mine. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark. I didn't check my phone. Because I already knew, none of them had called. Not one. And that silence told me more than any apology ever could. I woke up late the next morning, sunlight filtering through the thin motel curtains, painting golden bars across the worn carpet. My body ached from the unfamiliar bed, but there was something beautiful about that ache. It belonged to me. Not to duty, not to guilt, not to a family that had sucked me dry. Just me. The motel was quiet, the world outside moving at a lazy pace. No one knocking. No one demanding. I poured a lukewarm cup of coffee from the machine by the microwave, took a sip, and finally checked my phone. 23 missed calls. The first one was from my mother. Doing this to your family? Don't you feel cruel? No greeting. No, are you okay? Just the default weapon, guilt. I scrolled through the rest. Emma's messages came in like a tidal wave, each one nastier than the last. You think you're noble, Krista? You're a coward. You think we need you? You're nothing but a stuck-up nobody with a god complex. You'll regret this. We all see you now for what you are. They didn't get it. They really thought this was a tantrum, a phase. That I would come crawling back, arms full of apologies and more money. But they didn't understand. I wasn't running away. I was disappearing, exactly like Lily said I should. Only, this time, I'd do it in a way that would haunt them. That evening, I booked a small studio apartment on the edge of the coast. Paid up front. No family names, no cosigners, no forwarding address. Just me in silence. I didn't furnish much, a mattress, a small couch, a kettle. The basics. I wanted to hear myself again. Hear my own thoughts, after years of drowning in theirs. Around 9 p.m., I sat on the bed, cup of coffee in hand, when the motel hallway suddenly erupted in sound. Thudding. Screaming. Fists pounding on the door. Krista. Patrick's voice. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I already knew. You think you can do this to your own parents? He pounded again, the doorknob rattling violently. I sat still, my coffee balanced on my knee. You don't think we'll find you? You're nothing without this family. His voice, once so commanding, cracked now with desperation. That's what it was. Desperation. Not love. Not concern. Need. They needed me because I had always carried them. And now that the pack mule had laid down the burden, they didn't know how to function. Eventually, the pounding stopped. I heard his footsteps stomp away, followed by a car engine screeching down the road. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I knew what came next. The digital assault. And I was right. My phone lit up with texts again. From Linda. How could you do this to your parents? We're family, aren't we? From Emma. You ruined everything. Everyone will know what you did. A woman no one will remember when she's gone. I stared at the words, not feeling sadness, but something darker. Something solid and grounded. A certainty that I had made the right choice. That night, I didn't respond. I tucked my phone in the drawer and left it there, powered off. I fell asleep to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks outside my window. The next morning, the world was still intact. The sun still rose. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without 1,000 invisible strings pulling at my limbs. I took a walk along the coast, wind tugging at my hoodie, the sea air curling into my lungs like medicine. I watched seagulls swoop and dance, uncaring and wild. No one followed me. No one noticed me. It was terrifying and thrilling. Later that afternoon, the vibrations started again. I turned the phone back on to check the time, and there they were. More messages. More missed calls. Emma, of course. She was the loudest. Don't think you're special, Krista. You'll come back. You always do. I laughed. Not because she was wrong, but because she still didn't get it. The old me? Maybe. But not anymore. I rented a storage unit and moved everything I needed out of my old apartment. Left no trace. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't give a forwarding address. I simply stopped existing in the version of the world they controlled. And the silence was beautiful. Until it was broken, again. 3 days later, I returned from a quiet grocery trip, arms full of fruit and tea, only to stop dead in my tracks. The lock on my new apartment door had been changed. At first, I thought maybe I had the wrong floor. But no, this was it. Apartment 3C. My door. The handle was loose. Slightly ajar. My heartbeat didn't race, not like it used to. But my body tensed, every muscle bracing. I pushed the door open. They were inside. Patrick and Linda. My father and mother, standing in the center of my sparse, peaceful living room like squatters in a sanctuary. You think you can just erase us? Patrick barked. My mother trembled, but her eyes shone with that same stubbornness I'd grown up with. There's no such thing as walking away from family, she said. You don't get to lock us out. I calmly walked to the kitchen, placing the grocery bags on the counter like this was a casual Sunday visit. You've been living like we don't exist, Linda continued, her voice shaking now. Is this how you treat your parents? I boiled water for tea. My father stepped closer, towering over me. You owe us. We raised you. I turned to him slowly. You mean the gambling debts? The lies? The silence when Emma stole from me and you watched? He flinched. I owe no one, I said clearly. I paid every bill. Covered every mistake. Kept quiet while you paraded around in the life I bought. You can't talk to us like this. Linda cried. I stared straight into her face. And what did you ever give me? Abandoning me in hospitals, guilt-tripping me into debt, calling me selfish for not paying for your cruise to Cabo? My father's fists clenched. You're just angry. You think you're better than us? No, I said. I just know I'm finally done pretending we're a family. I pointed at the door. Get out. His face turned red, trembling with fury. But he didn't raise a hand. Something in him knew it was over. They left. Not with drama. Not with screaming. just with the quiet, pathetic shuffle of people who realized they had no power anymore. I changed the locks that same night. Installed cameras. Upgraded security. This time, they would not get back in. But they weren't done yet. They never were. 3 days of calm. That's all I got. 3 days of silence, of quiet mornings with tea and books, of late-night walks by the coast where no one shouted my name or hurled guilt like daggers. I began to believe they might finally give up, fade away like a nightmare that loses its grip in daylight. But I should have known better. It was Monday morning when I stepped into the lobby of my office building, a high-rise in downtown Seattle where I worked as a financial analyst. I noticed it right away. The eyes. The glances. People whispered, smiled awkwardly, avoided my gaze. My coworker Tessa gently touched my arm as I passed her by. "Krista," she said softly. "There's someone in the lobby. Causing a scene. I think it's your sister." The words barely landed before I heard the voice. Shrill, furious, unmistakable. "She's a fraud. She's been lying to all of you. She abandoned her own family." I pushed through the glass partition into the main lobby and stopped cold. Emma. She stood in the middle of the room like she owned it, her blonde curls frazzled, her face flushed and wild. In her hands was a stack of papers she waved like torches in a mob riot. "She cut us off," she screamed. "Left our parents penniless. She acts like some saint, but she's a snake. And all of you, you're working with her?" The receptionist stood frozen, helpless behind the desk. Customers stared. Colleagues whispered. Security hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene. I said nothing. Just watched. Emma's voice cracked as she tried to hold the room's attention. She left a child, her own niece, with no school money. My daughter. 13 years old and heartbroken. That last bit made a man near the elevator snort. A woman by the couch shook her head. The security guard stepped forward, finally breaking the paralysis. "Ma'am, we need you to leave." Emma flinched, turning her fury on him. "This is my right. That woman ruined our lives. She doesn't deserve to act like she's better than." But she didn't finish. The guard gently placed a hand on her elbow. She tried to swat him away. Then shoved. That was it. The second guard stepped in and, together, they escorted her out the glass doors. I walked past them as she kicked and screamed. I didn't look back. Tessa stood in the hallway waiting. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. I smiled faintly. There's nothing left to say. Because I already knew, this was just Act 2 of their circus. That afternoon, when I returned to my apartment, I knew before I even reached the steps. The crowd. My family. Again. Patrick. Linda. Emma. Lily. All of them gathered outside my building like some deranged reunion tour. Holding a large, sloppy banner scrawled in red paint. You can't turn your back on your family. I stood still on the sidewalk, watching the display like it was street theater. The neighbors peeked from their doors, some already recording on their phones. Emma yelled. "Krista, get down here. You think you can pretend we don't exist?" Patrick pounded on the gate. "This isn't over." Lily, the same child who said the world wouldn't notice if I disappeared, stood holding a stuffed bear like a prop in a pity play. My mother's voice, sharp as ever, rose above them all. "You'll regret this, Krista. You'll grow old and bitter, alone in a cage of your own making." I leaned against the balcony railing on the 3rd floor and dialed building security. Calm as ordering a pizza. They arrived within minutes. Professional. Unbothered. "This is private property," the guard said. "You're disturbing the residents. If you don't leave, we'll have to contact law enforcement." Linda burst into tears. Emma tried pleading. Lily whimpered for effect. Patrick cussed loud enough to echo down the street. None of it moved me. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just watched as they were escorted off the property, like trash swept from a doorstep. I walked back into my apartment. Closed the door. Sat on my couch with a cup of tea. Bitter, warm, grounding. This time, it wasn't guilt I felt. It was power. They were unraveling. And they couldn't stand that I wasn't coming undone with them. I thought it would end there. But they always found a new low. 4 days later, another message popped up on my screen. From Patrick. Krista. Just me. No one else. We need to talk. Please meet me at the old stadium. Attached was a photo of the football field on the outskirts of Bellevue, the same one he used to promise we'd visit when I was little. Promises he never kept. Let's end this like adults, the message read. Just come. No tricks. I stared at the message for a long time. My instincts screamed trap. But something deeper told me this was the last page. The final test. And I was ready. I packed the black backpack again. Not with clothes. With truth. Receipts. Credit card statements. Debt payments. Every transaction. A paper trail of betrayal going back a decade. I didn't need words. I had evidence. When I arrived, the stadium buzzed with the noise of a local game. Kids yelling, drums pounding. I scanned the stands and found him, Patrick. Alone, surprisingly. Sitting stiffly in a row of empty seats, the backpack I'd once left at the house in his lap. Finally decided to show up, huh, he said, half smirking. I sat beside him, keeping a careful distance. What do you want? I asked. He didn't hesitate. You think you're clever? Walking out, cutting us off like that. But we saw what was in that bag. You've been hiding money. Keeping accounts from the family. Deceiving us. I nearly laughed. Then read it, I said. Open the bag. Read it out loud. Let the crowd hear how much I stole. He froze. You're bluffing, he muttered. Really? I reached into the backpack, pulled out the files, and began tossing them across the row of seats like autumn leaves. Here's Emma's 2 years of rent. Paid by me. I flipped another page. Your $14,000 gambling debt. Reno. 2019, I took out a loan to cover that. Another. Lily's school fees. Christmas gifts. Groceries. Cell plans. Vacations you bragged about but never paid for. People nearby were starting to notice. Heads turned. Murmurs began. I stood up, my voice unwavering. You called me useless. Invisible. But I was the one holding this entire family together. And now? I'm done. Patrick sat frozen, mouth open, the truth spreading across his face like a slow, bitter sunrise. You'll regret this, he whispered. I looked down at him, the crowd's cheers rising in the distance behind me. No. You will. I turned and walked away. For once, he didn't follow. I didn't go straight home after the stadium. I wandered the streets for a while, letting the cold wind fill the space inside me where my father's voice used to echo. His threats. His guilt trips. His warped definition of love, always tied to what I could give, never who I was. This time, he was the one left behind. Alone. Surrounded by strangers who'd heard the truth echo in that stadium row. I ended up in a small cafe near the waterfront. The kind of place where nobody asked questions, where the hum of quiet conversations and clinking mugs offered a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I sat by the window, ordered a cinnamon latte, and scrolled through the dozens of unread texts waiting on my phone. It had begun. The fallout. The first one was from Patrick. Krista. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. But we're still your family. Let's fix this. I didn't reply. At 3 a.m., another voicemail landed. I don't want us to be strangers. I'm old, Krista. I don't have much time left. The man who once screamed that I was selfish, ungrateful, nothing without them, was now whispering desperation into my voicemail like I'd slipped into the role of ghost. Linda followed shortly after. Photos. Videos. A picture of their dark living room, lit by a single candle. My childhood home, stripped of furniture, the walls looking bare, the floor cluttered with unopened bills. We have nothing left, her text read. Do you want this family to fall apart? She attached a voice message, the sound of her crying. But not soft sobs. Loud, choking cries meant to pierce eardrums, not hearts. You're killing your parents, Krista. You're killing us. I didn't open the next messages. I let them stack like snowflakes I refused to shovel. Then came Emma. Always the sharpest tongue. But even her blade had dulled. I'm sorry, her message read. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I didn't know it would go this far. You know I'm struggling, right? I kept scrolling. Just this one time, help me with rent. Please. I swear, it's the last time. I let the phone fall onto the table, face down. Outside, the city buzzed on, indifferent to our drama. Cars passed. Couples walked. Streetlights flickered. No one cared. And for once, that anonymity felt beautiful. They weren't collapsing because I disappeared. They were collapsing because I was never supposed to stop giving. And now that I had, they didn't know how to exist. That night, I returned to my apartment. Turned my phone off and placed it in a drawer. I sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the stars peek between clouds. No noise. No phone. No one crying wolf at my door. Just silence. And it was enough. The days that followed were quiet, but the damage I left behind rippled outward. An old neighbor messaged me, one of the few I hadn't blocked. Your dad got fired, it read. Big blow up at his job. Something about throwing documents at his boss in a meeting. I stared at the message, waiting for the sadness to hit. It didn't. Patrick had always believed he could shout his way into control. Turns out the world didn't owe him fear like I used to. Next came Emma. She applied for a job at a mid-sized agency, one I had connections with from my finance network. But the story of her lobby tantrum had made the rounds. Someone had filmed it. It spread like wildfire through local business circles. A recruiter told me she was rejected during the second interview. She kept talking about loyalty and betrayal, he laughed. Seemed more like a soap opera than a resume. Even Linda, my mother, proud and immovable, had gone quiet. I heard from another cousin that her house had been without power for days. Bills unpaid. Credit cards maxed. The world she had clung to like porcelain had finally cracked in her hands. And Lily? No one mentioned her. Not even once. I didn't know if she was still in school, if she had friends left, if she even realized what her words had triggered. But I wasn't waiting for an apology from a child who was raised in poison. One crisp morning, I took a walk around Green Lake, my new ritual. The sun was soft, the trees dripping golden leaves, and the coffee in my thermos was strong and warm. For the first time, I felt the rhythm of my own life. Not dictated by family group chats or urgent bank transfers. I stopped by the farmer's market on the corner, bought a loaf of sourdough, and talked to a woman selling potted herbs. I told her I was thinking of starting a small balcony garden. She smiled and handed me a pot of rosemary. It's resilient, she said. Hard to kill. I liked that. That afternoon, I heard music from a street corner near the lake, an old man strumming a guitar, his voice raspy and raw as he sang an old ballad I hadn't heard in years. I stopped. Listened. Not because anyone told me to. Not because I had to wait for anyone else. Just because I wanted to. When the song ended, I walked up and dropped a $20 bill into his guitar case. He nodded at me, wordlessly, like we were two survivors sharing a silent truth. I walked away, every step lighter than the last. And I realized something then. I had always believed that disappearing meant giving up. But now, I saw the truth. Disappearing was the beginning. One late autumn morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. No text buzzing. No missed calls blinking on my screen. Just the stillness of a quiet apartment, sunlight stretching across the floor like silk. I brewed a pot of coffee, the scent filling the kitchen, and stepped onto my balcony. Below, the trees lining Green Lake had begun shedding their last bright leaves. A few elderly neighbors were walking their dogs. A little girl with tangled curls rode past on a pink bike, laughing as she wobbled down the sidewalk. No one I knew. And that was the point. I didn't have to perform. Didn't have to smile for people who were already crafting new ways to hurt me. I could just exist. And for someone who spent 3 decades being everything to everyone, existing on my own terms felt revolutionary. I sat at my small kitchen table, opened my leather-bound journal, and began sketching a greenhouse layout for my balcony. Just an idea, nothing urgent. My days were filled with those now, small joys, slow dreams, plans that didn't revolve around fixing anyone else's mess. For the first time, my calendar was blank. Not with neglect, but with freedom. I thought about Lily, the girl who'd smirked and said the world wouldn't notice if I disappeared. She was right, in a way. They hadn't noticed I was gone. They noticed what went missing with me. And by then, it was too late. A few days later, I passed by a cafe I used to hate. It was the one Emma always dragged me to for family talks, which usually meant ambushes disguised as coffee dates. Guilt over cappuccino. Requests buried in sugar packets. But this time, I walked in alone. Ordered a warm slice of apple pie. Sat by the window. No one followed me in. No one asked me for money. No one performed for pity. I chewed slowly, savoring the cinnamon. This was what freedom tasted like. Not sweetness, but solitude. When I finished, I walked back toward my apartment, passing the bookstore I'd been meaning to visit. A used copy of The Gift of Fear caught my eye in the window display. I bought it. No one to ask me why. No one to suggest I spend that money on someone else's emergency. At home, I flipped through the first pages, then stopped when my phone, which I had kept off for days, buzzed with a new notification. A video message. From Linda. I almost ignored it. But something told me to watch. The screen lit up with their faces. My mother slumped on the worn couch, her eyes dull, skin paler than I remembered. Emma beside her, thinner now, face twisted with something between shame and bitterness. Patrick sat in the back, head in hands, silent. Lily sat beside a flickering candle, clutching a stuffed animal. Linda's voice shook. We're about to lose the house, Krista. Do you understand? Your father's sick. Emma's job's gone. Lily's been bullied at school ever since that video from the lobby went viral. They laugh at her. Call her names. Emma looked like she wanted to cut in but said nothing. The video ended with Linda whispering, "Please. Just talk to us." I stared at the screen, not blinking. The silence in my apartment felt louder than ever. But it wasn't empty. It was sacred. They had made me feel invisible. Now they were the ones living like ghosts, wandering their own lives, afraid of their own shadows. I powered the phone off. Placed it back in the drawer. And returned to my journal. No reply. No reaction. Silence was my final act of resistance. In the following weeks, the noise slowed. The flood of messages became a trickle. Eventually, nothing. But that didn't mean the consequences stopped. News came from the fringes, whispers from distant cousins, neighbors, even the old woman who ran the grocery store I used to frequent with Linda. Patrick was living in a shelter now. After his outburst at work, he was blacklisted from several contracting companies in the city. No one wanted to deal with someone volatile. Linda had tried to refinance the house but was denied. Her credit was trashed, in part because of the years she spent maxing out cards tied to my accounts, never paying a cent. The house was under foreclosure. Emma couldn't find stable work. After the video of her screaming in the office lobby spread online, her name became synonymous with entitlement. Crazy sister who ruined her family, that's what someone tagged on a local forum. And Lily, no one really knew. Some said she was pulled from school. Others said she refused to talk to anyone. They didn't just lose money. They lost the image, the curated, toxic fantasy of a happy family with a quiet little donor always on call. They used to think I was weak for being the one who gave and stayed silent. Now, they were learning how terrifying that silence could be when I used it to vanish. And I learned to breathe again. I started planting herbs on my balcony. Bought a shelf for new books. Painted one wall soft sage green because I liked how the color looked in the afternoon light. I baked cinnamon rolls one evening just because I liked the smell. Not for holidays. Not for guests. Not for family. Just for me. The air in my apartment was no longer filled with obligation or invisible chains. It smelled like vanilla and rosemary and peace. I thought maybe I would feel guilty. Lonely. Angry. But none of those feelings came. Only stillness. A kind of quiet power. I didn't move across the country. I didn't change my name. I didn't hide. I stayed right here, but in a life of my own making. They hadn't expected that. And they wouldn't recover from it. Because I was the foundation. And when the foundation walks away, the house collapses, no matter how pretty the walls once looked. It was mid-November when the final pieces of the illusion fell apart. I didn't go looking for updates, but when people implode, word travels. Especially when the collapse is loud, messy, and public. A friend from my old job, one of the few I still spoke to, sent me a link. A short clip circulating on social media, shot outside a job fair downtown. There, in grainy video, stood Emma. Hair pulled into a tired bun, shoulders hunched. She was arguing with a recruiter, voice rising with frustration. "I'm not my sister," she shouted. "I'm not the woman from that video. You don't understand what she did to us." The recruiter tried to calm her, but Emma kept talking, louder now, as others began watching from nearby booths. "My daughter's been bullied. My parents are sick. We've been left with nothing. Don't we deserve help?" The video cut out before the recruiter responded. But the damage was already done. In the comments, people speculated. Some mocked. Others sympathized, but no one offered help. I closed the video, not with satisfaction, but with a strange, hollow ache. It wasn't that I wanted her to suffer. But it wasn't my job to rescue her anymore. Not after everything. That same week, I received a letter, not an email, not a text, but an actual paper envelope, postmarked from a shelter in West Seattle. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. Krista. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see all of it. I thought being a father meant receiving. That love came with conditions. I was wrong. I hurt you. We all did. I don't blame you for walking away. I wouldn't come back either. But I hope you find peace. I hope you're living the life you deserved all along. I don't ask you to reply. Just remember I said this. Patrick. I sat with that letter for a long time. The man who once laughed when his granddaughter mocked me, who raised his beer and said she's not wrong, had finally admitted the truth. Too late, yes. But still. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't healing. But it was acknowledgement. And that meant something. I folded the letter, placed it in the back of my journal, and didn't write about it. Some things don't need commentary. Some moments are just quiet truths, folded into our lives like old photographs, kept, but not framed. The days got shorter. My balcony herbs wilted in the chill, so I moved them indoors, setting up a little sun lamp by the window. I spent weekends baking, taking long walks through leaf-strewn parks, journaling late into the night with soft jazz playing in the background. No one screamed my name from the street. No one pounded on my door. The silence remained, not empty, but full of choice. And then, one afternoon, while browsing at the weekend market, I ran into an old acquaintance. Marcy, a distant cousin who used to show up at family events only to disappear before cleanup. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Krista? Wow. You look good. Peaceful, even. I nodded, polite. I heard about what happened. I mean, everyone did. The house. Your mom. Emma. I waited, letting her speak. They say you cut everyone off. That you left them to rot. I didn't react. Marcy hesitated. Then said softly, but I know what they did to you. I was there. I saw how they treated you. Honestly. I'm just glad you made it out. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she added, whatever you did, you were right. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't some sweeping apology on their behalf. But it felt like a small stone placed over the grave of a buried past. That night, I sat on my balcony again, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the city glitter beneath the clouded sky. A soft breeze brushed past, rustling the final leaves of the season. My phone vibrated on the table. A new message. From unknown number. It's Lily. I don't know if this is still your number. I just wanted to say. I didn't mean it. What I said. I didn't know what it would cause. I read it twice. Then 3 times. The girl who had mocked me, the child who had said, if you disappeared, no one would notice, had finally realized I had. And she had noticed. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Not even out of anger. But because some lessons can only be learned in silence. Let her feel it. Let her sit with it. The way I had, for years. I turned the phone off and returned to my tea. The steam curled around my fingers like warmth from within. They used to laugh when I walked into a room. Mocked me. Used me. Ignored me. Now? I was the phantom that haunted every corner of their unraveling lives. Not because I shouted. But because I had finally learned to be quiet. And in that quiet, I found power they could never touch. It was a chilly December morning when I realized I had finally, truly crossed over into a life of my own. No more waiting for closure. No more longing for apologies that would never come, or would come too late, laced with manipulation. I woke up before the sun rose. Wrapped myself in a thick robe, made a mug of hot chocolate, and stood barefoot on the balcony as the first snowflakes of the season fell. The city below me shimmered with early Christmas lights, storefronts glowing faintly under the gray sky. A season of giving. For so many years, this was when my phone would blow up. Dozens of messages. Can you help with gifts? Can you cover the electric bill until January? Lily really wants that new gaming console. Always demands disguised as desperation. No thank yous. No invitations. Just obligations handed to me like chains. But this year? Nothing. I hadn't changed my number. They just stopped trying. Some wounds finally learned not to reopen. And I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the local winter market, wrapped in my favorite navy coat, a scarf I had knitted myself coiled around my neck. I bought a small bundle of eucalyptus, a loaf of rosemary bread, and sat on a quiet bench sipping spiced cider. There were families around. Couples. Children. Laughter. But not mine. And still, peace. When I returned home, a plain white envelope had been slid under my door. There was no name on the front. Just my address, scrawled in rushed, anxious handwriting. I hesitated. Then opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No apology. Just a desperate request, in Emma's handwriting. Please, Krista. We're losing everything. The bank took the house. Dad's in the hospital. Mom won't eat. Lily won't talk. You win. You've made your point. Just please, help. Anything. Even a few hundred. No signature. No return address. Just hollow words floating on paper. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply folded the letter in half and placed it in the same drawer where Patrick's note and Lily's text still lived. I had built a small sanctuary inside myself for things I didn't need to carry anymore. And that drawer was part of it. I made a simple dinner. Stir-fried noodles with scallions. Lit a few candles. Played a soft piano playlist in the background. The apartment smelled of soy sauce and eucalyptus. Later that evening, I took out my journal, not the one for venting or recounting pain. A new one. One that I had started writing in recently, filled with sketches, quotes, bits of poetry, clippings from seed packets, notes on local greenhouses. A future journal. Not a past one. I jotted a line that had come to me that morning, while watching the snow fall. Freedom isn't running away. It's standing so still, they can no longer move you. I closed the cover. And breathed. In the following weeks, I began volunteering at a community garden near Green Lake. Every Saturday, I showed up in old jeans and gloves, digging soil, trimming branches, planting rows of kale and lavender. I met people who asked nothing from me but my time and laughter. There were no demands. No manipulation. Just roots, real ones, sinking into the ground alongside mine. Sometimes I heard snippets of updates. The house had been auctioned. Linda was living with a distant cousin across town, rarely leaving the house. Patrick was in and out of the ER with stress-related heart issues. Emma was renting a basement studio and cycling through short-term jobs. And Lily? Still no word. Sometimes, I saw their names pop up in community boards. Linda trying to sell old furniture. Emma offering tutoring services. But they were names now. Not anchors. Not weights. Just footnotes in a book I no longer lived in. One particularly warm day in March, I was tending to a row of tulips when a small girl walked by with her mother, eyes wide as she pointed to the blossoms. Look, Mommy. They're waking up. Her mother smiled and nodded. I knelt by the soil, brushed away a layer of mulch, and smiled too. Yes. They were waking up. So was I. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city exhale into evening. The air smelled like new rain. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing acoustic guitar again. Another street musician, singing softly about love and loss. I closed my eyes. Not to forget. But to remember, on my own terms. I had walked out of a room with no windows, a room that had convinced me I was only valuable if I was invisible. Now, I lived in the open air. No shame. No apology. No noise. Just space. Just choice. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge. Not punishment. Not destruction. But peace. The kind they could never steal again. The end. Krista's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the strongest thing we can do is walk away, not with anger, but with silence. She didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. She simply removed herself. And in doing so, she removed their power. Freedom isn't about escape, it's about choosing to no longer play the role someone else wrote for you. If you've ever felt trapped in a cycle of guilt and obligation, let Krista's story show you, you don't owe anyone your silence, your peace, or your life. You deserve to be seen, not just used. What would you have done in her place? Was Krista's silence the ultimate revenge, or should she have fought louder? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.